I never thought a Monday morning could feel this heavy. Not the kind of heavy you shake off with coffee. Or the kind that comes from a late night. No, this was the kind of weight that settles into your bones. The kind that slows your steps. Even when the world around you is rushing. My grandmother used to warn me about mornings like this. Baby, she'd say, you'll walk into rooms that were never built for us. And when you do, keep your head high. Her voice echoed inside me as I stood across from Redwood Global's tower. Glass shimmering under the Chicago sun like it had something to prove. To everyone else, the city looked alive. Buses hissing to a stop. Heels clicking on sidewalks. Horns slicing through the air. But inside me, storm clouds. My pulse was uneven. My breath shallow. Because I knew what I was walking into today wasn't just another Monday at the office. It was war. For 10 years, this building had been my world. 10 years of bending myself into shapes they could accept. 10 years of watching my work polished and presented by men who never looked my way when the applause came. My fingerprints were on every system, every breakthrough, but my name rarely made it past the second page of a slide deck. I gave Redwood my brilliance. And in return, they gave me invisibility. I caught my reflection in the glass door. A black woman in her 30s. Curls pulled back tight. Dark suit cut sharp, eyes carrying more fire than fear. I thought back to my first day here, a younger me. Trembling with nerves, clutching my resume like it was a passport. That girl just wanted a chance. She just wanted to prove she belonged. But the woman staring back at me now? She was done asking for permission. She was done proving. The lobby swallowed me whole. The air chilled and sterile. Marble floors gleamed like mirrors, reflecting back 100 versions of me with every step. On the walls, oversized photographs of Redwood's so-called pioneers stared down with their brass captions and polished smiles. Men in navy suits, their grins locked in history. Not one face that looked like mine. Not one story that carried the same weight as mine. I felt that familiar sting. You don't belong here. But I shook it off. I had heard it 1,000 times before. Sometimes whispered, sometimes shouted, but always meant to shrink me. Not today. Today I carried something more powerful than their silence. I carried proof. Buried deep in the encrypted folds of my laptop was the kind of truth that could bring this whole building to its knees. Fraud, greed, lies stacked on lies, and I was the one who had pieced it all together. Alone in the hours they thought I wasn't watching. My heels tapped against the marble. Steady now, like a drumbeat leading me forward. Fear crawled at the edges of my chest. But it couldn't touch the fire inside me. I thought of my mother working double shifts. Her hands raw from scrubbing floors. Telling me, don't let them take your shine. Felicia, I thought of my grandmother. Who never set foot in a skyscraper but knew the weight of invisibility better than anyone. Their voices braided with mine. Giving me strength. The elevator doors slid open with a metallic sigh. I stepped inside, pressing the button for the 28th floor. The brushed steel walls reflected me back, distorted but unbroken. As the doors closed, I whispered to myself, low and certain, they think I'm just a ghost in this building. But today, they're going to hear me loud and clear. The elevator jolted upward. With each floor, I felt the shift, nerves melting into resolve, fear folding into legacy. This wasn't just about me. It was about every young black woman coder who would one day walk into a boardroom and deserve to be seen. It was about the quiet power of refusing to disappear. When the elevator chimed, my breath caught. The doors parted, revealing the glass-lined hallway of the executive floor. Voices murmuring behind closed doors. The faint smell of stale coffee mixing with perfume and ambition. This was it, the battlefield. I stepped out, my heels striking like a war drum. Each click echoed my decision. I wasn't here to survive anymore. I was here to fight. Right finger. If you've ever had to work twice as hard just to be seen half as much, hit that like button right now. Because this story isn't just mine. It's ours. The executive floor always smelled different, like money had a scent. Leather chairs, fresh polish, perfume too expensive for anyone below this level. I walked past offices lined with glass. Executives hunched over laptops, whispering in corners, their suits sharp as knives. They barely looked up when I passed. To them, I was part of the background. A shadow that typed, fixed, debugged, nothing more. But I had stopped being their shadow. As I approached the boardroom, the glass door reflected back a face I almost didn't recognize, steady, unblinking, carrying a storm behind calm eyes. My grandmother would have said, "You look like somebody who knows what time it is." And she'd be right. This was reckoning hour. I pushed the door open. The boardroom stretched wide, walls covered with screens glowing like altars. Around the table sat the people who thought they ran Redwood, directors in tailored suits. Voices slick with arrogance, faces smooth with the comfort of never being questioned. At the head of the table sat him, Thomas, senior director, my nemesis, my betrayer, the man who once laughed with a glass of bourbon in his hand and called me a relic. He didn't even look up when I entered, just kept scrolling on his tablet, lips curling in a half-smile like the devil knew something I didn't. "Morning," he muttered, his tone dismissive, as though I was delivering coffee instead of carrying the truth that could end him. I took my seat, spine straight, every muscle tense but controlled. I could feel the heat rising in me, the urge to slam my files down, to shout, but I didn't. Rage might satisfy me for a second, but strategy would destroy him forever. Thomas finally looked up, eyes sliding over me like I was air. "Felicia, we'll need those system reports by noon. Don't fall behind." Reports. That's all he saw. A worker bee buzzing in the background. Disposable. He had no idea the queen was about to sting. As he spoke, I remembered the night I overheard him. 2 weeks ago. A late meeting I wasn't supposed to be in. But my access badge still worked. I stood in the shadows, heart pounding, listening to him and another director chuckle about how easy it was to bury the numbers, to hide millions in losses behind creative coding. My work repurposed to cover their sins. That night, I felt like my soul left my body. All those years of loyalty. All the nights missing family dinners. Missing church on Sundays. Telling myself it would all pay off. Reduced to being a tool in their corruption. I clenched my jaw, holding the memory tight. Betrayal is bitter, but it sharpens you. I glanced around the table. They were laughing now, trading jokes about some competitor. Sipping coffee like it was communion. Not one of them imagined that the quiet black woman at the end of the table carried the evidence that could burn them down. Right finger. If you've ever been underestimated in a room where you knew you were the smartest one there, drop a comment. Tell me how you held your ground. Because that's the power we carry. The meeting dragged on, charts and numbers flashing across the screens. I pretended to take notes. But my mind was elsewhere. Every time Thomas spoke, his voice slick with authority, I wanted to stand up and scream, "I know what you did." But timing was everything. Patience. Felicia. Patience. My phone buzzed under the table. A message from a trusted mentor. One of the few people who believed in me. "You've lit a fire that can't be ignored. Keep stoking it." I slid the phone back into my pocket, lips tightening into the faintest smile. He was right. This wasn't about surviving another day in Redwood's shadow. This was about tearing down the walls that kept women like me invisible. Thomas ended the meeting with a smirk, as if the world belonged to him. "Let's reconvene tomorrow," he said, pushing back his chair. "Some of us have bigger fish to fry." He glanced at me when he said it. I knew that look. It was his way of reminding me that I was small, that he was untouchable. But as I gathered my files, I thought, "You're not untouchable. Thomas, you're already burning. You just don't feel the fire yet." I left the boardroom calm, deliberate. My heels clicked against the floor, steady as a heartbeat, echoing down the corridor. To anyone watching, I was just another worker heading back to her desk. But inside, I was a storm. Back at my workstation, I pulled up the encrypted folder. The one I had pieced together in stolen hours. Emails, transfer logs, ghost accounts. Every breadcrumb pointing straight back to Thomas and his allies. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. Proof, not suspicion, not theory, proof. For a long moment, I just sat there, breathing, because the truth is, carrying evidence like this isn't easy. It's heavy, heavy with consequences, heavy with the knowledge that one wrong move could destroy not just them, But me too. But then I remembered the faces, my mother's tired eyes, my grandmother's wisdom, the young interns who whispered their gratitude when I mentored them. I wasn't just holding proof. I was holding justice. I closed the folder, locking it back in its encrypted vault. Timing. I had to wait for the right moment to strike. One move too soon, and they'd crush me. One move too late, and the trail could vanish. The office hummed around me, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, laughter spilling from cubicles. But in the middle of it all, I sat still, like the calm before a storm. And I whispered to myself, just loud enough to hear. They tried to erase me. They tried to use me. But they don't know, this time. I'm holding the pen. The office at night had a different rhythm. Gone was the chatter, the laughter, the steady hum of printers. In its place came silence, thick, humming like electricity, pressing against the glass walls that reflected my face back at me. I had stayed late again, my desk lamp throwing a soft glow over stacks of files. Most people thought I stayed because I was loyal. That's the lie Redwood had always fed itself. Felicia will always be here. Felicia will pick up the pieces. Felicia will never break ranks. They didn't know that loyalty had cracked. And cracks, when you press on them, become fault lines. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the faint sound of cleaning crews moving through the lower floors. My screen glowed with documents no one was supposed to see. Emails with subject lines like, adjustment strategy, alternate account, and, backchannel resolution. Language designed to hide crimes. The more I read, the colder I felt. My own coding, the algorithms I had spent years perfecting, had been twisted to move money where it didn't belong. They had taken my brilliance and weaponized it against the very integrity I believed in. Do you know what that feels like? To pour your soul into something, only to realize it's been used to build your own prison? I whispered to myself, not anymore. My phone buzzed again. Another message from that same mentor. Your silence is their shield. Your voice is the weapon. I stared at the words, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of truth. He was right. Keeping this buried wasn't safety. It was complicity. Right finger. If you've ever had to choose between staying silent or standing tall, hit like right now, because silence protects the powerful. Our voices, they set us free. I closed my eyes, breathing deep, and suddenly I was 12 years old again, sitting in my grandmother's kitchen in Atlanta, the smell of cornbread and collard greens filling the air. She had told me, baby, the world will try to make you small, but you ain't small unless you believe them. Walk in there knowing you belong. Her voice wrapped around me now, steadying my pulse. I opened my eyes, sharper, calmer. I belonged here, more than Thomas, more than any of them. The elevator dinged, my chest tightened. At this hour, only a handful of people had clearance. I quickly minimized the files, hands flying across the keyboard, just as footsteps echoed down the corridor. Thomas. Of course it was him. The man carried arrogance like cologne, strong, suffocating, impossible to ignore. He strolled past my desk, glancing at me like I was nothing more than a desk lamp still burning. You're still here? He asked, voice dripping with mock surprise. I forced a smile. Always, Thomas. Somebody has to keep the lights on. He smirked, pausing at his office door. That's why you're valuable, Felicia. You work, you don't question. A rare quality these days. My jaw tightened, but I didn't break. He disappeared inside, the door clicking shut, leaving me with silence again. But this silence wasn't empty anymore. It was loaded. I could feel it in my bones. I turned back to my screen, heart racing. Timing, Felicia, timing. One wrong move and he'd bury you before you could bury him. I saved the files, encrypting them under layers of code only I could untangle. Then slid a flash drive into the port. The screen blinked, the files transferring. Each percentage that ticked upward felt like a drumbeat. Louder and louder, until finally, 100%. I pulled the drive out. Small, weightless, but heavier than anything I had ever held. This wasn't just evidence, it was power. And power, when you've been denied it your whole life, feels like fire in your hands. I slipped the drive into my purse, My mind already racing. Who to trust? Who to give it to? The press? Internal affairs? Maybe the young black reporter who'd been digging into Redwood for months. Someone hungry for truth. Someone who wouldn't fold. As I packed up, I caught my reflection again in the dark glass. I didn't look like a victim. I didn't even look like an employee. I looked like a storm in a suit. And storms don't ask permission. I whispered, "It's time." Daylight always hit the glass towers differently after a night like that. The morning sun bounced off Redwood's mirrored windows. Sharp and blinding, like the building itself was daring me to look it in the eye. But I didn't flinch. I walked through the revolving doors steady, my heels clicking in rhythm with my heartbeat. This was it. The flash drive sat in my purse, humming in my mind like it had a pulse of its own. Every step I took toward my cubicle, I felt its weight, not just plastic and circuits, truth. Truth that could topple men who believed they were untouchable. When I reached my desk, the office was already buzzing. Phones ringing, junior analysts scrambling with coffee cups. The air carried that corporate perfume of urgency, the kind designed to make people forget their dreams while chasing someone else's bottom line. But today, I hadn't come to chase. I'd come to strike. I logged in, hands steady, pulling up the system logs one last time. I scanned through them, not because I needed reassurance, I already knew they were guilty, but because I wanted to feel the satisfaction of seeing their lies crumble into numbers on a screen. Ghost accounts, redirected funds, signatures masked under my code. They thought they were clever. They thought no one would notice. But they underestimated the woman who built the code. I leaned back, eyes narrowing. Today was about choices. Whom to trust, where to hit first. One wrong move and I'd be branded the angry black woman. Emotional, unstable, expendable. One right move and I'd be the storm they never saw coming. The email sat drafted in my inbox. Attached files encrypted. Addressed to a name I hadn't said out loud in years. Angela Davis Carter. Not that Angela Davis, but close enough to carry a weight. Investigative reporter. Black, sharp, hungry for a story that mattered. I hovered over the send button. My fingers shook, not from fear, but from the enormity of the moment. Once I pressed it, there was no going back. No more hiding. No more shrinking myself to fit into a world that didn't want me whole. I pressed send. The screen blinked. Message sent. And just like that, the first strike had landed. My breath caught in my throat. I closed my eyes, feeling the rush of adrenaline flood me. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Clicking through the airwaves, sliding into an inbox like a secret weapon. When I opened my eyes, Thomas was walking by, suit crisp, his smirk as polished as his shoes. He didn't notice me watching. He didn't feel the fire already at his feet. He leaned over a colleague's desk, laughing too loud, a hand on their chair as if the whole floor belonged to him. For years, I had watched that performance, the King of Redwood. Charming to the right people, venomous to the rest. Not anymore. I turned back to my screen. Calm. Inside, I was already at war. By noon, my phone buzzed with a single reply from Angela. Meet me tonight, off the record, bring everything. I stared at the message, a slow smile tugging at my lips. The wheels were already turning. But with victory comes danger. By 2 p.m., Thomas was circling. He stopped by my desk, leaning in close, his cologne burning my nose. Felicia, he said softly, you've been working late. Makes me wonder, what are you really up to? I met his gaze head on, unblinking, just keeping the lights on. Thomas, somebody has to. He chuckled, but his eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion in them now. The game had shifted. He could feel it, even if he didn't know why. As he walked away, I exhaled slowly, my fingers brushing against the flash drive in my purse. This was only the beginning. He didn't know it yet, but his empire was already cracking. And I was the one swinging the hammer. Night wrapped around the city like a velvet curtain, and the streets hummed with the restless energy only New York could carry. Neon lights flickered off wet pavement. Taxis rushed by, and steam rose from the grates like whispers escaping from underground. I pulled my coat tighter as I walked toward the cafe on 145th. The one Angela had chosen. It wasn't a fancy midtown spot where Redwood executives polished their lies over martinis. This was Harlem, my Harlem. Murals of Malcolm, murals of Nina, voices of ancestors painted on brick. Here, truth didn't hide, it lived. The bell above the door jingled when I stepped inside. The air smelled of espresso and history. Angela was already there, sitting at a corner table. Laptop open, braids pulled back, her glasses catching the dim light. She looked up at me with sharp eyes that didn't miss a thing. "Felicia," she said, standing to shake my hand. Her grip was firm, grounding. "You ready to do this?" I nodded, sliding into the chair across from her. My purse sat heavy at my side, the flash drive inside it like a secret heartbeat. Angela leaned forward, her voice low. "You know, once we start, there's no turning back. Redwood won't just come for me. They'll come for you first." I met her gaze. "Steady. They've already been coming for me my whole career, dismissing me, using me, stealing my work. This time, I'm not hiding. This time, they're going to see me." For a moment, she just studied me, then a slow smile spread across her face. "Then let's make them choke on the truth." I pulled out the flash drive, placing it between us on the table. It looked so small, but when her fingers closed around it, it felt like the weight of a revolution had just shifted hands. She slid it into her laptop, screen flickering as files bloomed open, emails, transfers, spreadsheets coded with precision. I watched her face as she scrolled, her expression hardening with every line she read. "Damn," she whispered, "this isn't just corruption. This is theft on a scale that'll rock Wall Street." My chest tightened, both with fear and relief. They thought nobody would notice. They thought using me, hiding behind me, would keep them safe. Angela's eyes flashed. They thought wrong. We worked for hours, piecing together the story. My voice shook at first as I explained the systems, the manipulations, the betrayals, but the more I spoke, the steadier I became. My anger sharpened into clarity, my grief into fire. By midnight, we had a map, every trail of money, every name tied to the scheme. Angela leaned back, exhaling. "This isn't just going to be an article. This is going to be an earthquake." I looked out the cafe window at the city that raised me. The same city where my grandmother once marched for civil rights. Where my mother worked 2 jobs so I could sit in boardrooms that still tried to erase me. This wasn't just about Redwood anymore. This was about legacy. About every black woman who had ever been told to stay quiet. The cafe had emptied out. Chairs stacked, baristas cleaning counters. But we stayed, hunched over glowing screens, building the story that would break Redwood wide open. When it was done, Angela closed her laptop, her expression grave but resolute. "Tomorrow morning, this goes live, and when it does, you need to be ready. Redwood will deny. They'll smear you. They'll call you angry, unstable, disloyal." I smiled, faint but fierce. "Let them. I've been called worse. But this time, the truth is louder." We stood to leave, the city now quiet in the small hours before dawn. Angela gripped my shoulder, eyes burning with conviction. "Felicia, you know what this means, right? You're about to become the face of this fight." I swallowed hard, the weight of it pressing down and lifting me all at once. "Then I'll carry it, because somebody has to." Outside, the first hint of sunrise cut through the horizon, streaks of orange painting the sky. A new day was coming, not just for me, but for every shadowed corner of Redwood's empire. I walked away from that cafe with my head high, the city buzzing beneath my feet, my heart steady. For years, they had written me out of the story. But now, I wasn't just in the story. I was the story. And tomorrow, the world would read it. I woke up before sunrise. The city still draped in that deep indigo that only Chicago mornings can pull off, the kind of blue that feels both infinite and suffocating. I stayed in my bed for a moment longer than I should have, letting the silence soak into me, as if bracing for the storm I had already set in motion. The newsroom's emails had started pinging hours ago, but I let them be. Let them buzz. Let them wait. This morning wasn't about response, it was about control. The reflection in my apartment window caught me mid-thought. Felicia James, the one they underestimated. The one they whispered about in back corridors. The good girl who knew her place. Only I didn't know my place anymore. I hadn't for weeks. And after last night's meeting with Damien Cross's empire of lies, I wasn't planning to find it. Coffee in hand, I stood over the skyline. The first threads of dawn painted the high rises gold, slicing through the lingering mist. It felt like a stage set just for me. I rehearsed my next moves in my head. Every email, every ledger screenshot, every subpoena-ready document, my arsenal. The city's pulse mirrored my own. I wasn't scared, not yet. Determined, yes. Wounded, absolutely. But the fire inside? That was mine. The first call came at 7:02 a.m. My phone lit up with the local investigative journalist, Mariah Langston. I didn't answer immediately. I let her leave a voice note. Felicia, I've seen some of what you've sent me. This is bigger than anything I've covered. The board is a house of cards. The city, they're going to notice. Can we talk? I exhaled. Slow, deliberate. Mariah didn't know the half of it. She had no idea how deep the rot ran, how calculated Cross's moves were. But she was sharp, connected, a black woman in the press who understood nuance, the subtle and often invisible forces that people like Damien wielded to keep women like me from ascending. That understanding alone was priceless. Meet me at the Indigo Cafe. 8 a.m., I replied. Short, unyielding, no room for negotiation. The cafe was my neutral ground, familiar, overlooked, yet central enough to command attention without interference. By 8:03 a.m., I was seated, the steam from my black coffee curling up like smoke signals. Mariah arrived moments later, headphones around her neck, camera bag slung casually, but her eyes sharp, scanning, calculating. She gave a small nod, respect, acknowledgement, unspoken camaraderie. I've gone through the files you sent, she said quietly, dropping her bag and sliding her laptop across the table. This isn't just payroll fraud. It's systemic. Cross has been manipulating vendor contracts, approving ghost transactions, siphoning data to shell accounts. And the board, they've been blind, or complicit. I didn't flinch. I'd known it for weeks. What I hadn't anticipated was how validating it felt to have someone else recognize the scale. The intent, and the timing? I asked. The public, the employees? How fast can this ripple? Mariah's fingers danced across the keyboard. Within hours. The screenshots you sent me are going to blow up on forums. Reddit, Twitter. People are already talking. Employees are sharing their missing pay stubs. Social feeds are flooding. By noon, Cross's credibility is going to be under siege. I allowed myself a small, bitter smile. Noon, I repeated. The word had become a drumbeat in my life, a countdown. A reckoning. Over the next hour, we built the narrative together. Every document verified, every ledger discrepancy highlighted, every timestamp cross-checked. I watched as the story materialized. A living, breathing entity, poised to leap from my files into the public eye. By 9:15 a.m., we had the first draft. Headline suggestions scrolled across her laptop. Inside Redwood's payroll collapse, how one executive uncovered systemic betrayal. Felicia James exposes cross-fin ops manipulations, employees rally online. I paused at the words. My name, spelled out in bold type, carried weight I hadn't felt before, not just professionally, but culturally. The story of a black woman fighting an invisible war in corporate America. Standing in the middle of a system built to overlook her brilliance. Her authority, her voice, it resonated in ways I hadn't allowed myself to admit. When we hit send to Mariah's editor, the newsroom lit up, notifications pinged, phones vibrated, Slack channels exploded. By 9:37 a.m., I was watching the ripple effect begin. Employees posted screenshots, tagging the official company account. The board's intranet filled with panic-laced messages. Cross's office, I imagined, was a storm, papers flying, executive assistants frantically dialing numbers. And then, at 9:42 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Text message, unknown number. You've lit the fire. Don't let it burn you. I swallowed, knowing the sender, Cross, still lurking in the shadows. watching, calculating. But this time, the message didn't scare me. It fueled me. I spent the next hour monitoring the fallout, coordinating with Mariah on what would go live next, preparing the next tranche of evidence. Every deleted approval, every timestamp, every vendor anomaly. Ready to drop if the narrative tried to shift or if Cross attempted to gaslight the board. By 10:30 a.m., the first media outlets picked up the story. Local stations, business blogs, social media influencers with massive followings, all amplifying the same truth. Cross's empire was riddled with deception. And Felicia James was the black woman who dared to expose it. I leaned back in my chair, letting the enormity of it sink in. My pulse was steady, the adrenaline hadn't left, but I felt a strange clarity. This wasn't just corporate warfare. This was accountability. This was representation. This was reclaiming space in a world designed to minimize voices like mine. The phone rang. Mr. Harrison, Redwood's chairman, his voice tight, measured. Felicia, we've seen the coverage. This is unprecedented. The board wants an emergency meeting at 11 o'clock. They want you present. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Understood. I'll be there. Hanging up, I felt a surge of power, careful, calculated, righteous. The narrative was no longer mine alone. It was public, unassailable, a tide Cross couldn't control. I allowed myself a deep breath and, for the first time in weeks, a flicker of satisfaction. Yet I knew, this was only the beginning. Cross wouldn't go quietly, and while the city celebrated the exposure, I had to prepare for the counterstrike. The subtle retaliation that came from men like him who underestimated a black woman armed with truth. I glanced at the clock. 10:45 a.m. The storm was building. By noon, Cross's carefully constructed facade would crumble, and I would be standing at the eye of it, unbroken. Before leaving the cafe, I pulled out my notebook, pen poised over the page. I wrote one line, simple, deliberate. Power doesn't ask permission. It takes accountability. The pen paused. The words hung in the air like smoke. I knew some would hear. Some would read. Some would feel it. And maybe, just maybe, it would inspire them to stand. To act. To reclaim what was rightfully theirs in a world that often tried to erase them. I walked into Redwood Global's boardroom at precisely 11 a.m. Heels clicking against polished marble. Echoing like a metronome marking the rhythm of inevitable change. The conference table stretched before me, a shiny battlefield of power suits and forced smiles. Damian Cross sat at the far end, posture rigid, a mask of composure that didn't reach his eyes. Every executive in the room shifted subtly, glances darting between me and the chair he occupied. The tension was palpable, a living thing that pressed against my ribs with every inhale. As I took my seat, I felt the collective weight of unseen forces. Past mentors who had advised me, colleagues who had doubted me, and the countless black women who had been sidelined in this industry. They were with me, ghosts of resilience and perseverance, fueling a fire that no deceit could extinguish. Felicia, Harrison's voice was measured, calm, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside. Before we begin, the board wants to understand the situation. The evidence you've presented is, well, overwhelming. I leaned forward, letting my fingers brush the leather tabletop, the tactile reality grounding me. Overwhelming is an understatement. This isn't just about accounting errors. It's systemic, it's intentional, and it's been happening under the noses of those sworn to protect employees, shareholders, and the company's integrity. My words were sharp, cinematic in their cadence, slicing through the room like sunlight piercing a stormy sky. Cross's jaw tightened. I could see it in micro-expressions. A twitch at the corner of his mouth. A shift of his hands. But he said nothing. That silence, heavy and deliberate, was his first miscalculation. I took a breath, allowing my gaze to sweep the room, making eye contact with every executive who had once whispered about my ambition, as if it were a flaw. I've provided verified documents, ledger discrepancies, vendor irregularities, and employee testimonials. I've given you the opportunity to address this internally before it reached the press. The story is out, the public is watching, and the employees, those who've been overlooked, underpaid, and ignored, are not waiting for explanations. A murmur ran through the room. Not the polite murmur of agreement, but the sharp, uncomfortable realization that they were complicit in enabling deception. The weight of accountability pressed down on every shoulder in that boardroom. Harrison cleared his throat. Felicia, your courage is remarkable. The board is prepared to take immediate action, including suspending Cross pending further investigation and initiating a full audit. Cross finally spoke, voice low and dangerous. You think this ends with me? You've stirred something that can't be controlled. You've made an enemy of everyone who stands to lose. I let a slow smile spread. Deliberate, unwavering. No, Damien, I've made justice unavoidable. I've made accountability public. And I've made it clear that underestimating a black woman, someone with knowledge, integrity, and persistence, is a mistake you'll never forget. The room was silent after that. The echoes of my words lingered like smoke, invisible yet undeniable. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from recognition of power realized, hard-won, righteous, unstoppable. After the meeting, I retreated to my office for a moment, the adrenaline fading into a calm clarity. I opened the news feeds and social media streams. The story had gone viral beyond anything I anticipated. Employees were sharing their experiences openly. Hashtags #Felicia James and #accountability at Redwood were trending. Local news anchors referenced the exposé, praising the courage of a black woman holding corporate giants accountable. I allowed myself a brief, private smile. This was more than victory, it was reclamation. Representation. A statement to every black professional who had been told to sit down, be quiet, or know their place. By 2 p.m., I had scheduled interviews with national media, podcasts, and advocacy groups. Each appearance was an opportunity to amplify not just the specifics of the case, but the larger narrative, systemic inequities in corporate America, the resilience of black women in leadership, and the importance of holding institutions accountable. In the evening, I walked through the city streets, the Chicago skyline glowing against a setting sun. My reflection in the tinted windows reminded me of the woman I had become, unshaken, visible, unapologetic. The fight wasn't over. There would be hearings, retaliation attempts, whispers in corners, but for now, the balance had shifted, and I had earned the right to stand tall. I called Mariah to discuss the next wave of media coverage. Felicia, she said, excitement in her voice, the public response is incredible. People are seeing you as more than a whistleblower. They see a symbol of accountability, courage, and truth. You're inspiring others to speak, to act. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Good, that's the point. Change doesn't happen quietly. It happens when we refuse to be ignored. The following week was a blur of press conferences, internal board meetings, and employee town halls. Redwood's board moved quickly. Cross was removed. Investigations launched, and company policies revised to prevent future misconduct. But beyond procedural wins, the intangible shift was greater. The culture, the awareness, the acknowledgement of black women's contributions and authority. It had changed. I sat in my office one evening, notebook open, pen poised. I wrote, "Legacy isn't built on quiet compliance. It's built on courage, truth, and refusing to be invisible." I paused, thinking of every young black woman who might see this story and feel, for the first time, that her voice could matter, that her knowledge could be power, that her actions could alter the course of an entire institution. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I reflected on what this reckoning had taught me. Power is not just about titles or positions. It's about presence, integrity, and the willingness to act when others won't. Justice is not granted, it is demanded. And legacy is not inherited, it is created. One decisive, unapologetic act at a time. I sent a final message to the employees who had stood beside me quietly, sharing their stories, lending their courage. We did it together. This is just the beginning. Keep holding the line. Keep speaking truth. Keep building legacies that can't be erased. And as I turned off my phone, letting the hum of the city fill the room, I knew this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. A new chapter not just for me, but for every black professional fighting to be seen, heard, and respected in a world that often forgets they exist. If you believe in accountability, courage, and the power of standing your ground, hit like, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and comment your commitment to action. Change starts with us. I leaned back, letting the words, the victories, and the responsibility settle. I had faced the storm. I had lit the fire. And now, I was ready to carry it forward. Unbroken, unapologetic, unstoppable.